Of the audience, if you wish to provide any comments to the board, we ask that you provide those in writing through our executive director, our BESE staff, and they will ensure that the board members receive any submissions or comments that you have. So we're asking just for the policy forms that any comments be provided in writing. So at that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the department and Ms. Jessica Tucker.
All right, good morning, board members, and good morning, audience. Today we wanted to bring forward to you an opportunity to really think about pre-K and the efficiencies and outcomes that we're achieving across the state in all of our programs, and just sort of see where the board is wanting to go in the next 6 months, if there's space to further improve this. I know it's been a very important initiative for this board throughout your tenure, and we want to make sure that we have time to reflect on the big and important questions about this issue as we continue and plan for the coming 6 months, and also the Race to the Top grant that we may or may not apply for, which also relates to these same issues. So with that, we'll begin.
Okay.
And the main points that we want to consider today are really about
okay, we'll get handouts. Thank you.
All right, so the main points to consider today are really about outcomes, cost efficiencies, and then a question of whether it makes sense to have a unified strategy for the state for all of these various programs that are striving to achieve the same sorts of things with kids.
I want to give you a few demographics. In 2010-11, we had approximately 63,000 4-year-olds in the state of Louisiana, and 42,000 of those children were identified as at risk. 65% of our 4-year-olds in the state are served in some kind of a 4-year-old program. I know that some of you were on this board when in 2008 Louisiana passed Act 876 guaranteeing universal access to pre-K by 2013. We know that we have not been able to totally fund that, even though it's in the Act and we would like to, we're not able to fund it. The different programs that basically are touching a lot of our 4-year-olds. In the LDOE, we house 3 programs: the LA4 program, the Title I students, and the special needs children that are of this age. The BESE office, of course, houses the 8G program. The governor's office houses the non-public school early childhood development program. In the Department of Children and Family Services, we have Head Start, which is really a separate entity unto itself, and then the Child Care Assistance Program. We have some outcomes, and we have both short-term and long-term outcomes. First of all, our short-term outcome is to meet Goal 1, to have our children enter kindergarten ready to learn. Then we want to improve our academic performance in elementary school, both on the 3rd grade I-LEAP, the 4th grade LEAP, all the way up through the 8th grade LEAP. And we have seen that with the children who started pre-K. Our first cohort now is out in 8th grade, and we saw good results, and I think that you have some information on that, and Dr. Jones is going to share a little more. Our long-term outcomes are higher graduation rates, and we know that those children who have had pre-K, who have excelled, been on benchmark or above on the DIBELS test, are those kids that are moving on and are able to be successful at basic or above on our LEAP and I-LEAP, and are going to have the most likelihood of graduating. They also have higher levels of post-secondary participation, and a major piece that I feel is critically important is lower rates of entry into the criminal justice system.
So we'll pause here, and sorry for the jumping back and forth. We're going to let literacy, they're the experts in all of that, and they will provide all of the context there. But to ask from the policy office the broader questions about what Dr. Laster just named, do those seem like the right outcomes? Are we only looking at academic outcomes for these programs? Is the board wanting us to look broader than that? We would love to get your feedback and just create a space here where you can provide your initial reactions to us.
Okay. BESE members? I think the question we're being asked is if at this point, do you have questions about the outcomes, whether they should be broader, whether we should be looking at all outcomes for all pre-K programs, whether we should be comparing outcomes or having consistent assessments so that we ourselves can, with the programs that we have under our control, ensure that we're making the best possible investments of our early childhood dollars. So, Ms. Johnson, I'm going to guess that you may have a question or two. Yeah. Ms. Johnson, can you speak a little closer to the mic? It's showing on. You want to maybe try another mic?
We're going to work on it.
This is great. I'm the only one who's on. We're going to work on this.
I was talking to my teacher boys.
Okay.
Basically, that if we can get to a point where when we look at children, we're looking at apples to apples rather than apples to oranges or to lemons or to whatever it is that we're doing. So I would like to make sure that we are also very consistent in what we're doing in terms of evaluating the children and saying that they're kindergarten ready.
Yes, Ms. Buquet.
All right, another teacher voice. I think the lower rate of entry into criminal justice system is, of course, major, but also among these things that we all. What other social measures do you think we can put in?
How important this conversation is, and And the amount of investment that we're making both as in BESE and around the state, just because, and then I think the critical question here today is, are we looking at outcomes, in a consistent way? Are we spending our dollars the most effective way? We learned in our retreat on Monday that since we have been investing in early childhood through AG funds, that we have spent $178 million in supporting early childhood through AG funds alone. What I'm told is that we currently spend $200 to $350 million every year on early childhood. And what I'm going to suggest is that we really don't know. We don't have a common way of looking at outcomes for all of these programs. Each program seems to have its own structure, its own way of application, its own way of outcomes. And the big question is, what is BESE's role in helping to develop with that might or might not? What's your desire and what's our role? And then how will we get there? So that really, I hope, is sort of framing the questions about today, because we make a significant investment in early childhood, yet it's real clear that we have not met our goal of having all at-risk children enrolled, and that we're unlikely to be able to receive more dollars to achieve this goal. So we're looking at the current monies that we spend, the $350 million that we spend every year on early childhood. How can we leverage that to include more children? I think this is very similar to other conversations, very similar to a conversation we had yesterday. Thank you. Mr. Romer.
And I'll make it short because I want to hear the rest of your presentation as well. Has there been I'm trying to ask this the right way. On slide 5, where you list the current Louisiana pre-kindergarten programs, have we ever gotten all these people in the room at the same time? And was there any results? I mean, I get frustrated. Not only do we not seem to have a coherent evaluation, although that's what we're working toward, and I appreciate that that's what we're working toward. But where is there duplication? Where, is this the most efficient? I know there are different sources of funds, and that's driving it. But why does the mayor's office run Head Start, for instance, in some places? To me, there seems to be a disconnect between these different entities to some extent. That if we had a better coordination effort, a single management effort, that in fact we could get a more efficient program in place. I could be totally wrong. I mean, I don't want to pretend to be an expert on these. I'm not. This is my 30,000-foot view of what's happening, and I know I've been frustrated when we seem to approve a lot of different pre-K related programs from different sources, and is the essence of my comments, are they wrong, or could we do better in that effort, you think? Is that a fair question?
Let me go back and say that as part of our goal number 1 of getting children ready for kindergarten, we at the department have pulled all of these entities together. We have representatives from DOE. The good thing about the DOE program is that LA4, Title I, and Special Ed are all under the Literacy Office. So we work, those programs are basically as coordinated as far as programmatic. We've had Robin from the BESE office, so she comes to work with us. Petrushka from the non-public school, she's working with us. We have Gail Kelso and Kyrie Wahi from DCFS. So they're all on the same team. We're all working toward that same goal of getting children ready for kindergarten. So we're on that same page. Now, whether or not our funding has been coordinated, that has not typically been done because the funding sources are different.
Sure.
We have, the Department of Education has nothing to do with Head Start, other than we can work with them. Head Start money comes from Dallas and flows to a grantee, which may be the mayor's office in some areas. It may be a police jury in some areas. It may be a local school district. But the state of Louisiana itself, the Department of Ed cannot be the Head Start grantee. It has to go to other grantees. But we're trying to work with the Head Start Collab office to make sure that we're getting our programs together and that we're addressing some of the same standards. We have people that are working with some Head Start centers that are actually going into the Head Start centers providing technical assistance. We've invited Head Start to our trainings for early letters so that they can get trained and therefore go back and train their teachers. We've invited Resource and Referral, who provide professional development for the early childhood, early care centers, so that they can go back. But they're separate systems at this point.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
We do have a state council too, that all of these entities are represented on the Bright Start Council, that do discuss high-level issues, not necessarily low-level issues, but high-level issues pertaining to children starting at birth.
I have one question. Do we have, in working with all of these groups, do we have information on what their goals are? I'm assuming their goals, I would hope their goals are around kindergarten readiness also. And if they're not, what are they? And then do we look at everyone's outcomes and compare the outcomes of each program?
We don't have the results or outcomes from all of the programs to compare to.
We don't receive that?
We don't have that.
Madam
Okay.
Chair,
Ms. Johnson?
let's talk about this a little bit, if y'all don't mind, a little bit more in depth. There is let me just put it this way, because I do like early childhood. In my parish, we are involved in a collaborative with the Department of Education. We have aligned and are using the same materials, and we were part of that letters training. I'm talking about Head Start people. We're a part of that letters training. We have the technical assistants coming in. All of our teachers are in the TAP model. They've been trained in the TAP model. And we just purchased all of those Dibbles kits because we're trying to get our kids ready so that when they go to kindergarten, all the materials that have been used in the LA4 program are being used in that Head Start program. Now, I consider it a model because it is one that is not in the public school system. There are some significant issues here. One is Head Start people are licensed. Their centers are licensed, which is a lot. But if a Head Start program is in a school, it doesn't have to be licensed, which makes no sense to me because they fall under the educational whatever that is. So that to me is a significant issue. The other issue that I have found is that, of course, you have to work with a school system that has the qualified teachers to work with the teachers who are in a Head Start program in order to do the monitoring and evaluation, which is what the Department of Education is doing with the program in Iberville. So you have to build a relationship with the school system so that they're supportive of what you're trying to do, which is one of the things that has happened in that particular system. The other issue is that you asked the question, and I'm going to answer the question. In the Head Start law, their 2013 goal is their children be kindergarten ready. I mean, it is the same goal. Now, it is trying to get people to understand that we have a kindergarten ready definition, and they need to adjust to that particular definition, but it is in their law.
Okay.
So we're trying to get to that.
Thank you. It sounds like you have the model, Ms. Johnson.
Well, early childhood, everybody knows how much I love it, and I think you got to make it work. And if you look at the data in terms of where children come from, one of the things you will find is that if they're in the LA4 program, they may be at this level. If they're coming from Head Start, they may be at this level, and if they're coming from somewhere else, they may be at a different level. So trying to get all those things aligned so that it makes sense is what I'd like to see happen.
Okay. Any more questions? If not, we'll let Jessica continue with her.
And just to give you an overview of sort of the structure of the remaining parts of the presentation, the next section is really about specific outcomes and providing you with information about what we do know and don't know about specific programs. And then the section after that raises the financial question of where the funding streams are and how they work, and if there should be questions about that.
If you look at your your slide, it talks about meeting the department's goal number 2. And that goal number 2 is that children will be literate by 3rd grade. If you look at the slide, you can see that at-risk children from LA4 have exceeded the state's immediate goal for 2014 of 75%. At least so if we've got to get there for 2014, if you look at cohort 3, we're at 73%. So by 2014, we will definitely meet our goal of 75%. Let me stop to also tell you that in your boxes in the back, we put copies of the LA4 longitudinal study, the impact of LA4 participation on academic achievement in 3rd and 4th grade leap, and also the on-time 4th grade arrival report. Both of those reports are in your box, and if you have any questions, you can contact me later on after you've had a chance to look through those reports. The next slide shows the percent of students scoring basic or higher on ILEAP, 3rd grade math. The first one was ILEAP on 3rd grade language art. This is on math. If you look again,
I need you to pull your mic up, please. It's okay.
If you look again at your slides, can you hear me now?
Try again.
Children that participated in the LA4 program as opposed to those children who had no public pre-K. Look at the differences. Public school pre-K, which is LA4, is making a difference. Our children are scoring at least at the 75th percentile for cohort 3.
Dr. Jones,
yes,
does no
ma'am.
public pre-K mean they were not in any program, period? Is that how you defined in that?
It means that they were in no public pre-K program. They could have been in a Head Start program. They could have been in child care program.
Y'all didn't break it out by where they were?
No, not yet. We didn't do that. But we will have that ability with our new tracking system that'll start this year, where every child that enters a kindergarten program will be asked to assign into SIS where did they spend at least 6 months of their pre-K year. So we'll be able to know where every child that's coming in is coming from, and we can then do a further breakdown.
So where would BESE's early childhood children be?
They would not
The
be.
AG. Would they be?
No, they wouldn't be in the no public pre-K.
So they're not on this at all?
No.
Okay.
If you look at the next slide, it talks about the percent of students meeting goal 3, on-time arrival for 4th grade.
Really?
And if you look at cohort 3, we have 78% that are arriving on time in 4th grade, as opposed to those who receive no public pre-K, which is 68, so it's like a 10-point difference. Again, if you have additional information that you want,
I do.
you can check, and if you have...
I want our early childhood included in this. I don't understand that.
Let me make sure. Where's Gary? Am I correct? Okay.
Ms. Jenkins, can you respond to that?
Well, we never have been, but that's part of what the contract is with P-Card Center that you guys approved yesterday, so that our kids will be included in this study from now on.
Okay.
Well, the question is, can they go back?
Yeah, and actually, that's going to be that's why it was a little bit more than the contract, because Susan Eisen has told me they can go back for a couple of years. And the reason is we never really had access to the SIS data in order to do all this, and I'm not a data person, so the contract that you guys approved yesterday will include HG kids in this from now on.
Okay.
And going back.
So they're nowhere on these? All the children
we
that
only have, I can give you, developing skills checklist results from, going back, but I can't.
But nothing as far as...
Not as far, right now I cannot give you those statistics.
Okay.
Ms. Astu, the department has paid for the LA4 evaluation, and we've been a year in the making with Robin and ULL to get this to occur for y'all to vote, because we felt like it was critical to have these children in the evaluation also.
I have a question.
No,
Ms.
Ms. Buquet and then Superintendent Tyler.
At what age do students enter Head Start?
Head Start is for 3 and 4 year olds.
3 to 5.
3 to 5.
But they also
Early
have
Head
early Head
Start.
Start
Early
at 0.
Head Start is birth to 3, and then 3 to 5 are in Head Start.
And what kind of, every federal program has an evaluation section,
Huh.
They have an evaluation system.
and so is that, I mean, do we have any comparison with that?
We have, so if we can jump ahead just one slide, this is slide 12 in your presentation. This sort of gives you an overview of, for other programs, what we do know. So the chart, just to explain a little bit of what you're looking at, it's the non-public program is the first column, the second column is LA4, and then the third column is 8G, but from a year ago. We got the more recent data, but it was just, we didn't get it added in, but it's still comparable. So what you're looking at here is from the beginning of the program until the end of the program, what percentage of the kids moved from scoring in the lowest 50th percentile on the nationally normed test to above the 50th percentile. So for example, in the non-public program, 59% of kids moved in language from below the 50th percentile mark to above that, indicating, you know, a much higher level of readiness for kindergarten. And Head Start, as I understand it, and I'll defer to Dr. Laster if I misspeak here, they are in the process of doing this and also do some DSC evaluations when it's linked with schools, as I understand it. The CCAP, which is the child care program, does not do this, and Title I students are evaluated within the other programs where they're receiving additional funding. Is that correct?
That's correct. The Title I students, we've not had Title I dollars to include them in with the LA4 program at this point. You know, we hope that eventually we'll have Title I dollars so that those kids can be melded in with the 8G and all of the ones that come under the department.
So I want to make sure I understand this slide. You're telling me that what this number is, the percentage of kids who in the pre-test scored below the 50th percentile, but in the post-test moved above the 50th percentile.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
AG looks good.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that's a very good indicator. I mean, it's not a bad indicator. It's better than no information at all. But,
Well, we'll throw out a,
but we don't know. We don't know enough details to really.
it's not the same kind of data.
Yeah. I appreciate it, though. I mean,
So, Ms. Johnson, if you, 1 second, if you don't mind. Ms. Tyler has asked, and then Ms. Johnson.
I just, thank you so much.
I've been holding her off.
Madam
Okay.
Chairman, I just wanted to ask one or two questions. Is the data for Title I early childhood included in this particular data? Do we still have early childhood done through by use of the Title I funding? Do we still have those programs in the public schools?
Yes, we still have Title I programs in the public schools. All of our Title I schools use pre- and post-test, so we do have pre- and post-test data, but it just hasn't been included in
It
the
wasn't included in
evaluation.
this data?
No, because
This is LA4 only?
Yeah.
Okay, and my next question, when you say arrive, fourth grade, students arriving to fourth grade on time, are we saying on time, on grade level, or just on time? I know that there is a real push in our department with the revisions of some of our goals that we want to emphasize arriving on grade level on time. So I'm asking, do we have that data broken out according to?
Yes, you have. Well, if you look at the first two were the third graders who were basic or higher. So that means that they arrived in third grade on level. And so for ILEAP, they got on level. When they got to, then for fourth grade, how many of them got to fourth grade? So that's indicating to us that they were not retained. And if they came through, it's the same cohort. So cohort 3, if they got to third grade on ILEAP and they were basic or above, then when they got to fourth grade, they got there on time without retention, and they should be basic or above.
Should be.
So if you
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you compare those two slides, and I had not thought about this question, Superintendent Tyler, before right now, but in doing the comparison between cohort 3 and in 3rd grade and cohort 3 in 4th grade. So there are 75% at basic or above in 3rd grade, and then the slide for 4th grade says 78 are arriving on time. So as I would understand it, that would mean 3% of them are theoretically not at basic or above when they arrived, as a rough estimate.
Ms. Johnson, thank you.
Well, I think I don't want to, the slide on page 12 is a bit confusing to me.
Okay.
So, but I think it's a question that I need to ask probably offline, because I'm concerned about what's in it, because it really doesn't look like it's saying what I thought it was saying. Language, percent of children above the median, and language showing the growth. So we don't know where they started, but we're saying 59 of them, or 59% moved above something. Is that what it's saying?
Yes, ma'am. So there would have already been a percent of, and I can pull this data for you after the meeting, there was already a percent of kids that were above that median to start with. So the whole raw percent of how many kids would be above the median is actually higher than 59. What we're trying to get with this slide is to show you the effect this program theoretically had on those kids. So of the kids that were not yet at that 50% mark, how many of them eventually moved up? And so you would assume that the kids that started above stayed at that level, and then this was sort of an additive element, if you will.
Well, just for appeal, I think it would have been, because if you look at this, it's saying, in my opinion, we moved 66 kids above in print in a non-public program, and we only moved 62. So it would seem as if the 62 is really a number that is reflective of those children who were below, that the number is really higher, but we can't tell that by this.
Yeah, I apologize for that. We were just trying to combine a lot of data onto one slide, so my apologies.
Okay, thank you.
So at this point, I would love to, if it's okay with the board, get a little feedback from you. I think you've said a bit, but we would love more guidance from you on whether what we've just provided is adequate, where your concerns are, where you're pleased with what you've seen about the sort of outcomes that we should have for these programs, and where you want to know more, where you would like us to research or ask questions, whatever that may be.
You know, there is a report, and maybe they just do it in my parish, but I think they do it in all of them, where they actually look at the kids who are assessed the first time in October kindergarten dibbles, and they prepare a report, because I have it, that shows where the children come from, and there are 3 categories that are on it. Those who come from LA4, those who come from Head Start, and those who come from other categories. That's the way it's set up. And so I know they do it in my parish, and it's based on the dibbles, the October dibble assessment. So I would think that could be data that we should look at all over the state, and that we could probably take, that would be, to me, that would be important data to have.
Okay, and also, I just want to remind you that this evaluation goes to the legislature and on our website every year of every district, the instrument they use, and how their children did on the incoming kindergarten readiness.
Right.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Romer.
I appreciate, and I want us to keep doing the policy forum, so I don't want it to be an unpleasant experience. I appreciate the slides and the information. There's lots of good information in here so far. I think a lot of it proves what I've already said and others have said, which is we have a disconnect to some extent within these programs, that we're testing different data, we spend monies differently, we manage monies differently, and I'm not certain and I appreciate that everybody's invited to the meeting. I think we got to go beyond inviting, and I don't know, I'm grasping here as to how we do it. I think we have to go beyond inviting them to the meeting. I think we need to try, as Ms. Johnson suggested, not only agree that kindergarten readiness is the goal of these different programs, and I know they have some subtleties within each, but what is that definition of kindergarten readiness? we need them to agree to a common evaluation instrument on how we're going to determine outcomes. We need to eliminate
definition.
duplication of management if we are coordinated and we are using the same outcome measurements and we are using the same instruments to prepare students generally. We need to find out where management can be eliminated, quite frankly, and more resources into the classroom. I think it's one of the few topics that's probably supported 100% on this board is the effectiveness and the need for quality pre-K. And yet, it's obvious to me, and it's not the department's fault, and it's not BESE's fault, and it's not somebody else's fault, but it's obvious that other groups have seen this importance, but we're going at it from 50 different directions with different outcomes expected. Some of them are half jobs programs, half let's prepare our kids for the future. I'm looking for guidance from y'all's perspective. You don't have to give it to me today. Anybody else in this
Jessica,
room?
will you pull up slide 15? I hate to jump ahead, but guys, to me, a picture says 1,000 words
Yeah,
sometimes, and
but-
here it is.
Before we do that, Ms. Esther, I want to remind the board, that we do have a definition of
We
kindergarten
do.
readiness.
We
that-
have a
that y'all
definition of
voted on.
kindergarten, but is
But I
everyone
wasn't-
using
I
it?
wasn't speaking of,
Yeah.
I think we have concluded that we agree in the definition, but does Head Start, do these other programs buy into that definition or not? I don't know. I know they agree with the goal, Ms. Johnson, but do they agree that the goal is the same goal, not just in words, but in a measurable sense, it's the same goal?
Is it a
Mr. Rumble,
statewide definition?
The entities such as Head Start were included
Okay.
in developing that definition. I can let Dr. Slack and Ms. Jones headed that task force if you'd like for them to address that.
No, we believe you.
Let's stop. That's just one example of the
Yeah.
things I've just mentioned. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and somebody is more than happy. I have plenty of people that tell me I'm wrong all the time, and I'm very used to it now, so it doesn't bother me.
You're wrong.
Okay. You think I'm wrong that we duplicate services, that we duplicate management, that we have an incoherent approach to pre-K? I think we do have an incoherent approach.
We don't have a way of measuring outcomes for all these programs. We don't have a
No.
common assessment.
I'm not saying you alone can solve the problem. You can't, because there are programs that with different funding sources and different management. But somebody give me a cheat sheet of who's in charge. Okay? I mean, I don't know how else to do it. And let's get them in the room. And let's talk about what we're doing well and what we're not doing well. And if we can't get on the same page, then we got a bigger problem. I don't mean to preach to you. I appreciate this forum, and I
purpose of
appreciate
the
the
forum.
information you're giving me. But
Mr. Geis, who would like to speak to Mr. Romer, I believe. Mr. Geis, do you want to speak? No. Okay. Any other questions at this point? Then you can go back to where you were in the presentation. I just thought that this really does identify with one of the big challenges around this conversation today.
So if we can go to slide 14, I think we were at the slide before. This gives you an overview of approximate numbers of the number of kids served, the funding levels for the various programs, and then the cost per pupil. I know there's been interest in this board in universal pre-K, and as I see it, this presentation is, the additional funding does not seem like it's coming soon. So the purpose of this forum is sort of a step one. Let's look at how we can do better with what we have. And I think it's important, as Ms. Dastuk pointed out earlier, we spend approximately $200 million on this program, and we have a great rating for most of our programs, and they're seen nationally as effective. But to your point with universal pre-K, and I don't know if that's where we're headed, I don't know if that's the position of the department, but just to throw this out as a figure, there are other states such as Missouri which have a similar rating in quality to ours, in fact a little bit higher. And because of however they efficiently structure and fund these programs and the administration of their various entities that run this, they are able to educate kids at approximately $1,800 less per year, which I ran the estimated numbers on that. And if we were to get to an efficient place like that in Louisiana, with our current funding, we would already have enough money to fund pre-K for every child in the state of Louisiana.
Whoa, that is powerful.
Which programs are you talking about?
So this is, it's a table of national rankings for each state.
No.
And
What I'm asking, are you talking about programs that are funded through the state? of Missouri? Because we went back and looked at something with them a while back, doing something because of the quality.
Okay.
So which programs are you talking about? They're state-funded programs?
It doesn't name them specifically. It just says all reported resources per child for their statewide pre-K programs.
Okay, so you're talking about, that is the state, those are the state dollars. That's what it is. Yep.
Perhaps, Ms. Johnson, I'm sorry that I don't know more details.
And the reason why I'm asking is because we have LA4, Title I, Special Ed, and AG considered, basically, I consider those state dollars.
Yes, ma'am.
So are those the dollars that if we got $1,800 less in that total figure per child, we would be?
So when I ran that estimate, so when you look at this chart, just to give you a quick overview, there are stars by a couple of the programs for a number of reasons. One, the special ed pre-K that funds more than just educational services. The Head Start, as you know, is for additional services beyond just the educational component.
Well, and it's also for a different population.
Yes, ma'am. And the CCAP program also includes a much broader age group. And so being conservative there and just pulling out the money that we know is related to pre-K, it's approximately $200 million. So to come up with the fact that I just said to you, I took the $200 million, divided it by what they said that what this report said we were spending per child, and got a number very close to the number of kids that we say we're educating in the state with pre-K currently, which is about 42,000. I then took that same $200 million and divided by the cost that Missouri spends per child, and when I did that, it was at 63 or 65,000, which is the total number of 4-year-olds that we have in the state, which is where I came up with the statement that I just said.
Okay, I want to know more about the Missouri model and what they did.
Yeah.
I do.
So this just provides you an overview of where we're spending and how and the eligibility of those programs. This chart, which Ms. Dastug referenced earlier, is our best effort to capture the various funding streams of how this money gets to all of the various programs that are providing pre-K services in our state. I'm happy to go into the specifics to the extent I understand them, but just to be clear, the boxes in the middle that say federal, state, and district, that's just to clarify that the sources you see going below those are coming from those levels of government. So for example, federal, if you follow the arrow to the right, is providing the Reinvestment Act money, CCDF, TANF funds, and other federal funds to DCFS. They also provide some of those to the governor's office and the LDOE. We can follow it all the way down, but the point of this slide is to honestly elicit the reaction that you had, which is this is interesting. I'll use the word interesting.
Does Missouri have a flow chart on how they fund child care?
We created this, so I can definitely look into that for the board.
Okay.
So if there are no questions on that, at this point I would love to just get more feedback from you. I know I'm hearing that you would like more information on Missouri and what they're doing to perhaps spend more efficiently than we are, but are there other questions that you have, other comments, or actions that you would like the department to take in pursuit of doing better for our kids?
Questions? Mr. Lee?
I think this sheet is very informative. It's good information.
Thank you,
But
Mr.
it
Lee.
also shows that there's a lack of, I'm going to say, accountability in how those dollars actually play out in the pre-K classroom.
Yes, sir.
And I think that's what Mr. Romer was speaking to. We need some. You know, I was trying to say that in your absence. Once. But there needs to be better organization, better structure, better coordination, better services for the child.
Any other comments at this point? Yeah, if we go back to our critical goals and we go to the goal of students entering kindergarten ready to learn, with the goal of having 50% of our kindergartners performing at benchmark on DIBELS by 2012, I think that really, you know, I think in my mind hones in that that this board it has invested and truly understands the importance of early childhood. I don't know how much we have control over the whole, delivery of services in early childhood, but since we are the K-12 policymakers, I think we have perhaps have not been asserting our responsibility as strongly as we should be, because because we have the responsibility for these children after early childhood. So I would say that we could be more proactive and assertive, and I know individual members have been, but we, I believe, have a right to insist on the outcomes of all of these programs, and that there be some consistent evaluation of these programs, and that we see the different outcomes and returns on investments in this, whether we're administering it or we're responsible or not, because these are the children that we get, and we're charged, with getting through the K-12 and ready for the world. So I think we should be more insistent and demanding of this information in a format that we can use that can drive good policies. So I think, Ms. Tucker, you've done and all of you today, Dr. Laster and everybody, you've done a great job in giving us a big picture of early childhood. And at this point, really, board members, it shouldn't just be me speaking. So is there any other things that you would like to see or you believe we should be pursuing? Now's the time.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Johnson.
I do think that there are some things we ought to pursue from a policy-making position. One is, and I know people were at the table, and that there is a surface view of the definition. So if there's a way that we could put in policy some insistence of this is the state definition for early childhood, for pre-K, for everybody. Some kind of, and I don't know how you do this. Also, I think that there ought to be and it's hard to say this because I don't want to put anybody under the spot, but we have the pre-K standards. And there ought to be some agreement, to me, some signed agreement that everybody uses those particular standards. Now, I don't know, because you see, I'm trying to be very cautious so I don't get tarred and feathered, because I understand what happens. I've been around the children under 6 since the 60s. The other, so those two things. The third thing is, I think we really need to, I happen to like Dibbles, which most people know that. And I think what it does in kindergarten how you get to what it does in kindergarten ought to be reflective of what goes on in a pre-K 4 center, no matter if it's LA4 or wherever it is, so that they know when they get to kindergarten, they got to reach those particular benchmarks, which I think have to do with knowing so many uppercase and lowercase letters, knowing the colors, knowing the sounds of, the first things that they do when they go. So I think those are things that we ought to have some, if nothing else, some strong advocacy from this board for, because they are important. And it's very clear to me that what you do at this end affects what happens in 3rd and 4th grade. And then lastly, because I know what's going on in private daycare and in Head Start, there were 65,000 children 4 years old, but only 42,000 were at risk, and all 42,000 are not in any program. So, in my opinion, the children you serve first in Head Start or in any of these other programs ought to be the 4-year-old children you're trying to get ready for kindergarten, in my opinion. I'm not a working parent who got the 3-year-old at home saying, that's you cut me out of the picture here. But I just think that that's a way to look at this because it's so critical. And then I kind of agree with my colleagues here that it would be good if we could really get our arms around the funding, so that, and I looked at Missouri, because when they did the quality points, making these 4-star, 5-star, they kind of looked at stuff from Missouri at that particular time. The daycare people did. So to understand how they got to that, I'd like to know, because if we can be that effective, it would be important. But the board has to decide that it is going to open its mouth about some of this, and if they don't do it, it just won't happen.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments at this point?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Lee and then Mr. Romer.
Back to the slide before this one.
Yes, sir. This side?
No, before that.
The
Well,
funding.
The
yeah,
fun one?
that one.
That's amazing.
It looks to me like reports could be prepared based on the bottom right. That's the common area for all of the sources of funding and for all the programs. That's the common point. And looks to me like reports could be prepared not only on funding, but on the quality of the program, the readiness of those children. So I would think that's something, a point where it could be addressed to determine the effectiveness of all of these different programs.
Mr. Lee, would that be something that you would want for the board, for the public, for schools, for parents? Who would be your ideal audience there?
For all.
Okay.
We just need to start shining some light on the effectiveness of various programs.
Mr. Lee, I think that the new data system that we're putting in place will probably address that, hopefully. I'd also like to ask Dr. Slack, since we have just 2 or 3 minutes before the end of the program, to address the Early Learning Challenge grant, because as we write that, we are having to collaborate with a lot of stakeholders, and if by chance we get that, which we hope we will, I think that this will put some things in place that will help out with what you're seeing and what you've heard today. So Dr. Slack, could you just give us a little brief overview?
Sure. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
As many of you know, the Early Learning Challenge Grant, the draft regulations are out. We are waiting any day now for the final regulations to be released, and then we will have 6 to 8 weeks to respond to those regulations. So we're anticipating a due date of the grant in mid to late October, as late as the beginning of November. We think Louisiana is well positioned. We all agree, working across different agencies, that we can have more coherency with our early childhood programs and preschool efforts. We have made a tremendous effort over the past year to work very collaboratively in improving early childhood outcomes. We are one of 25 states that have a state assessment that measures kindergarten readiness. 20 of those states require a particular instrument or a selection from a short list. We are one of those 20 states. Only 11 of those states measure kindergarten readiness across multiple domains, which are addressed in our kindergarten readiness definition. Just 11 states currently, or as late as late last year, measure more than one domain, and we are one of those states. So we are well positioned with successful state efforts, and we will be sharing that information in our grant, because this grant, much like the previous Race to the Top grant, we must address our successful efforts as well as how do we plan to improve on our efforts as well. So,
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the collaborative work that you all are doing and who you've brought to the table?
Certainly. Well, the collaborative effort really surfaced over a year ago with our comprehensive literacy plan. Many of you have seen that plan. You know about that plan. The comprehensive literacy plan is birthed through grade 12. We had 3 task forces. We had a birth through 5 task force. We had a K 3 task force and we had a 412. The beauty of that approach is that there were members in each of those task forces. They not only collaborated with one another within their own task force, they collaborated across task forces, because everyone feels like it's important not only to be accountable for your group that you work directly with, but all children before you receive them and after you receive them. So from that effort, many other efforts have surfaced, including this most current effort, the Early Learning Challenge Grant. We have different agencies represented, DHH, DCFS, the State Department. We have begun conversations in preparation for this grant, having meetings discussing our current efforts, and much like many of you up on the board have asked, what is the mission, the goals, the vision of these different agencies? We are in the process of exploring that right now, so that we can, Bright Start, for example, has a vision and a mission as well. So different agencies, different groups have different visions, and we are looking at that so that we can create a more streamlined approach, a more coherent approach about how we can address the particular criteria in the Early Learning Challenge Grant, which is to increase the participation in high-quality early childhood programs and improve the outcomes for these children as well.
Okay.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, Mr. K, Mr. Romer, and then...
Remind us who has signed on to the common definition that you came up with and worked so hard on, and then we approved. How does that move along across these agencies?
Basic. DCFS has signed on to that definition, and since DCFS has, that means all of their child care centers. We've sent copies of the definition. We've printed 80,000 copies to make sure that everyone in the state has a copy of what it is to be ready for kindergarten.
You may remember, board members, that these were distributed in June, and some of us took them to our libraries and other places, and I bet you have some left that we could distribute some more.
We've got some more.
And,
DCFS has signed on. The Head Start Collab office has signed on. So that's with your Head Start collaboration. We're also working with family daycare home centers. And that's your parents that take care of 6 or less children in their homes.
And we all know there are a lot of those out there.
So we've gotten the family daycare home centers involved. Dr. Laster shared the definition, I believe, at one of the children's cabinet meetings and the advisory council, so we have them on board.
Well, when you say on board, they've actually signed on.
Well, we don't have a sign-off sheet, but we presented the information to them, so everyone knows that the definition is there. But Head Start, child care, and early childhood programs, all of our school systems know what's going on, as well as the non-public early childhood program. They are in concurrence with this also.
Is there any way we'll actually get a signature that this is our definition? Wasn't there a law passed, and that's what led to the definition being formed? It wasn't an act?
It wanted us to look at a definition of kindergarten readiness, but it didn't necessarily say we needed a sign-off procedure. But that may be something that if
or an adoption, maybe an adoption kind of procedure where the organization formally adopts the definition and it begins to drive.
That's an issue that
after Mr. Romer.
That we can bring up. We have another one of our meetings set up for our partnership meetings later next month, and at that point we can bring that up to the group because all of those people will be there, and we can see if we can get something formal done at that time.
Thank you. One second, Ms. Johnson, if you don't mind. I have Mr. Romer, Ms. Givens, and then I'll go back to you.
And I'll make it quick. I mean, the fact of the matter is we can't afford slide 15. Okay? And we not only need to be more aggressive, we need to be obstinate about it. And we do and should have a louder voice. And I appreciate that we're trying to collaborate more. Collaboration's not enough. That money list, there's $350 million we're spending in the project you listed here today, and we have kids who still aren't getting access to K-4, and those that are getting access, we don't have a common evaluation instrument in place amongst these groups. We can't afford it any longer. Our kids can't afford it because they're not prepared for school, and we can't afford it financially. Now, I don't know if we need to call our senators and our governor and everyone else and get them in the room and get them to agree, but it's obscene. Okay, it's obscene for our kids, and it's obscene for our taxpayers. And it's typical, and I know I know Keith Guy said I only had one time to preach a day, and this is my second one. But I think I've made my point. I commend Walter. He's the only person I know.
Per meeting, Mr. Romer, per meeting.
I commend Walter. He's the only person I know that could look at this chart, and he made sense of it. To me, I don't see how it's possible.
Okay. Ms. Gibbons.
Well, mark this down. Mr. Roman and I agree.
Okay. But make sure that is recorded in the minutes.
I'm counting children, and on page 4, you tell me we have 63,000 4-year-olds. 42,000 of those 4-year-olds are at risk, and 65%, which is 40,950 of our 4-year-olds are in programs.
And we don't know what percentage of those are at risk.
Well, no, that's part of what I want to know.
Good.
And the other part of what I want to know is whether or not the 65% include those children that are in private pre-K programs as well as those that are in publicly funded pre-K programs, and you're frowning.
Okay, who can answer that?
Looking at that number.
Turn your mic on, sweetheart.
Basically, the 65% of the 4-year-olds served are probably all at risk, because if they're served in 4-year-old programs, that's the data that we have. So it should say 65% of our 4-year-old at risk.
Okay.
So it's those are at-risk kids.
These are the at-risk kids. So we basically don't know where 21,000 of our 4-year-olds are. Is that what you're telling me?
Their other kids are not considered at risk, so they're probably in non-public schools. They may be in child care centers.
That's what I mean by private providers.
They were private providers, or they're at home with mom, or they're in non-public schools, but they're not considered at risk.
But that number concerns the fact that we don't know where they are. Bothers me a bit, because I really would like to have all of the children accounted for, so that when we make a case, we can make a very strong case for the need to support these public programs, because they are supporting the at-risk children. And I would hope that private providers, if we did a survey, would let us know how many children they have, because some of these providers may be eligible for assistance under some of the programs that we can't afford on page 15.
And that's, I'm sorry, we're working with DCFS and DHH to try and get a unified data system. If we can ever get a data system that talks across all programs, then we can get a little bit more information. But right now, our systems don't talk to one another.
I understand, but that's still not going to tell you the children are in private care.
In private care, DCFS deals with child care.
You would never know where my children were, because I never went through the Department of Family Services.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is that we need to know what's happening to the children who don't consider at risk as well, because they're presently not at risk. If we're not monitoring them, we don't know if they become at risk, because they're not in the system.
Okay. Any more questions? Otherwise, are there any more questions? Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and one. I think every policy forum. This is our third. Gets better, gets stronger. I think we're honing in on what it is that the board wants, and I'd like to thank the Superintendent Tyler for her leadership and bringing this forth, and all of you here. So. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to conclude the policy forum, and we will begin the full board meeting at 10:30. Thank you. This was fair. Good job.
Testing, 1, 2, testing, testing, 1, 2, testing. This is the meeting of the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, Thursday, August 18th, 2011, in the Louisiana Purchase Room. Mic test. Ms. Gibbons. Whoop. Ms. Buquet.
Jill, would you come here a minute? Jill, would you come here a minute?
No, I just gave them all to you. Thank them all to you. Thank you.
Jill.
Okay, what do you need me to do? What do you want me to do? And what about give me the little small thing. And then I can see if you want it. I'm not going to take that. Never mind. No, see if
Well, this is a new system that the Department of Education is putting in place to extract data from
okay.
Japan and all that.
Yeah.
Hot and steamy, everybody's smiling. I don't know what that's about. Well, you see anything in here that's good for her? Did you really? The lady just came up with yeah, I mean, what?
Who is
Tell me what they mean.
this is?
What do they mean?
I mean, this item is this item. Okay. So have
Joan Hunt.
this.
Joan Hunt. Is Linda Johnson calling you?
Yeah.
Okay, blur that money out. Joan. That's me. Yeah. That's me.
Could very well be in my car. Okay, this is my, We ready? Board members? Mr. Dobart is now an official board member, honorary. Okay. Good morning. At this point, I'd like to call the Louisiana State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education board meeting to order. May I have a roll call?
Yes. Mr. Bayard. Here. Mr. Bayard is present. Mr. Bennett. Here. Mr. Bennett is present. Ms. Bradford. Ms. Bradford is absent. Ms. Buquet. Ms. Buquet is present. Ms. Astug.
Here.
Ms. Astug is present. Mr. Garvey. Here. Mr. Garvey is present. Ms. Givens. Ms. Givens is present. Mr. Geis.
Here.
Mr. Geis is present. Ms. Johnson.
Here.
Ms. Johnson is present. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee is absent. Mr. Romer.
Here.
Mr. Romer is present.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll have the pledge led by Mr. Charlie Michelle. We're from Lafourche Parish School Board, correct? Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you remain standing, we'll have the prayer by Cindy Arsenault. Come on forth.
He can hear. Go ahead.
Heavenly Father, we pray that you will give us your gift of knowledge, that we might always make the best decisions for the good of all school children in Louisiana. We pray that you give us the wisdom to know and define our tasks, the strength to build and refine our educational goals, and the courage to persevere as necessary. We ask for your direction that we might make unselfish decisions for those we serve. We pray that all who are assembled here have a safe journey home. We thank you for all your past and future blessings. Amen.
Amen. Okay, next item.
Item number 5, approval of the agenda, adding items 13 through 19 on the emergency agenda.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda by Ms. Buquet? A second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. There's a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any comments? Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries.
Item number 6, approval of the minutes of August 3, 2011.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve? Thank you, Ms. Gibbons. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Buquet. There's a motion and a second to approve the minutes of August 3rd, 2011. Any objection? Motion approved.
Item number 7, notices of intent duly advertised in the March 2011 issue of the Louisiana Register and ready for final adoption. Item 7A, the recommendation from the department is to not approve this item.
Okay, audience members.
Mr. President, what does that mean, not approved? Do you want it to be deferred?
It doesn't. It'll be. My understanding is, Superintendent, is that it will be brought back. So by not approving it, it'll go off the agenda, allow the department to look at some additional public comments and perhaps modifying the policy and bring it back to us.
Why did you not put it on the agenda?
Because it was due for final adoption today.
Thank you,
Okay.
ma'am.
So go ahead. Okay, thank you.
I'll just move to remove it from the agenda.
Okay. We have a motion to remove this item from the agenda. Is there a second?
Not approve it.
Okay, we have, Ms. Gibbons, will you modify your motion to not approve the item? Is that correct?
Yes.
Just to not approve the item.
Not approve, Nina, that's correct? Not to defer, but not to approve?
Yes, ma'am. The department's intent is to let this die on the vine and come back with an entire new policy language to replace it. So
Right.
we need to not approve it.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gibbons. Is there a second? Second, Mr. Geis. Audience members, there are 4 cards here for public comment. I am, given that this policy is going to be reworked and come back and go through the process, I am going to ask that you not come forth for public comment. You'll have the opportunity through another process. And we appreciate you being here, and we appreciate your involvement. Thank you.
Item number 8, report by the State Superintendent of Education.
Ms. Tyler.
Thank you. Good morning, board members. I'm so delighted to speak to you this morning. Much has happened since we held our last full board meeting in mid-June. First of all, for nearly 700,000 public school students across our state, the summer vacation has come to an end, as most districts and schools began their 2011-2012 school year last week. There are many positive things happening in education across our state, and our aim is to make sure this trend continues, as we are optimistic about our partnerships through the hard work of our administrators, staff, teachers, and students in 70 school districts and 98 charter schools statewide. This year will be the most successful year, we believe, in the history of our state. In fact, just yesterday, the department released ACT results for the class of 2011, and the results indicate more of our students are meeting college and career readiness benchmarks. As you know, the ACT is taken by high school students and used by most universities and colleges in our state to determine student admission, scholarship, and placement in college courses. But even more importantly, the national test measures whether students have the essential knowledge and skills to succeed in college and in the workplace. The good news is that Louisiana students, more of them, in fact, do meet the college and career readiness goals that we have set for them. In our state, the average composite score in 2011 increased to 20.2, up from 20.1 in 2010. This matches the increase in the national composite, which also rose by 1/10 of a point. Since 2001, Louisiana's average composite score has increased 6 times faster than the national average, up 0.6 of a point from 19.6 in 2001 to 20.2 in 2011. During that same time period, the national average increased just 1/10 of a point. Also, on Tuesday of this week, the department released test results for end of course and summer retesters. The results of the end of course test showed dramatic gains for high school students from last year to this year, with the percentage of students earning a passing score increasing by 9 percentage points in English 2 and geometry, and 8 percentage points in Algebra 1. Also, more of Louisiana's 4th and 8th graders are advancing to the next grade after summer retesting. In fact, the percentage of 4th and 8th grade students meeting promotional standards this year is the highest since the accountability system was put in place in 1999. While in the 2011 legislative session concluded in June, and we'll be working with you to develop new policies to comply with these new laws, much of the work of the department has centered on implementing those key policies that we already have adopted. As we work to engage our publics in the implementation of common core state standards and assessments, the department has launched a new section on our website featuring information on both of these new policy changes. At the same time, our teams are working collaboratively and aggressively to ensure a smooth transition when these new policies are fully implemented during the 2014-2015 school year. Another policy change that is ongoing is the implementation of Act 54. In fact, this school year, all 70 districts and our charter schools are participating in the value-added pilot for tested grades and subjects. And in their most recent meeting, the ACE committee voted to move forward with the establishment of work groups which will make recommendations for tools to measure the performance of teachers who teach non-tested grades and subjects. Now, on the national front, several policy initiatives have recently been announced, including a new round of Race to the Top grants. And just a few weeks ago, U.S. Education Secretary Arne Duncan announced a waiver program which will offer states relief from No Child Left Behind requirements in exchange for the adoption of reform models and initiatives. We are exploring each of these national policy issues, and we look forward to dialoguing with the board about these as we learn more over the next several months. Pardon me, I'm suffering with allergies this morning. Also last month, the department took time to celebrate some of the most outstanding educators in Louisiana at the 5th annual Cecil J. Picard Educator Excellence Symposium and Celebration. I'd like to take a moment to again congratulate all of the regional finalists and winners of the Teacher and Principals of the Year Awards, as well as State 2011 Superintendent of the Year, Dr. Gary L. Jones from Rapides Parish. Finally, I'd like to recognize someone that we have come to really love and appreciate in the department, Mr. Sam Pernisi, who recently announced he will be retiring from the Department of Education on September 29th. Sam has dedicated himself to the education of Louisiana students for 36 years, and he is a tremendous asset to individuals and groups inside and outside the agency. For the first 15 years, Sam worked to assist in the development and administration of the state's testing program, back when the concept of standardizing grade level tests was a fairly radical idea. For the next 10 years or so, Sam managed our school report card program, which was the department's first attempt to share school level data in an easy to understand format. He's also managed the school incentive program, the forerunner to our current accountability program. And for the last 10 years, he has helped lead and assist in the development and refinement of the state's accountability system, as well as the department's data collection and analysis program, including BESE's District Dialogue Project, the analysis and interpretation of ACT scores, and first-time freshman reports. We want to thank Sam for his years of tireless work, contributions, and for devoting so much of his talent, passion in life to collecting and using data to drive decisions and improvement that has benefited thousands of students in Louisiana, and even more importantly, will continue to benefit students long after they leave us. So please join me in thanking Sam Pernisi. We will miss you, Sam, and we thank you. Madam President and Board, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Tyler. Board members had wonderful things to say about Mr. Pernisi yesterday, and I hope that you feel the appreciation and good wishes of all of us.
Do we get to say one thing again today?
You may.
Sam, I just wanted you to know that Linda has decided that you can't leave the building, so your ID badge no longer works. I'm afraid you're going to have to stay till December 31st after all. But good luck in your retirement, if you escape.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbons. We move on to the next item.
Madam Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Buquet.
You know, we've worked so closely together, as I pointed out yesterday, and I see you have your little harem with you still, so we are still going to be in the building. I know you've taught them a lot, and it's been such a pleasure to work with each one of you. But Sam is our leader, and good luck and Godspeed.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Ms. Johnson. This is the feel-good.
Sam
This is the feel-good part of this meeting.
He's probably glad to leave because one of the things he'll be able to say when he leaves, I don't have to worry about that Linda Johnson calling me anymore. You don't get away that quick and that easy. I probably will worry you wherever you're at on Falls River because I'll need somebody to explain some of this data to me as you've done so professionally and excellently in the past. And I honestly appreciate it. It's been a pleasure, not just working with Sam, but because he has other people who work with him who I guess he tells them, you know, ask that Linda Johnson, see if you can help her. And they do. So you have a great staff of people who work with you, too. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Lee.
Just briefly, since we're repeating yesterday.
It appears that we are.
Sam is the State Department of Education. He's the institution, has been for a long time, has, in my opinion, has been the image of the department in a quality way. And Sam, that's been most valuable to this board, to each of us individually, and we appreciate you and your services. We're going to miss you.
Thank you. Mr. Lee. Okay, I think that's everybody. We'll move on to the next item of business.
Item 9, Board Committee Reports. Item 9A, Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee. Mr. Bayard.
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, on behalf of the Academic Goals and Instructional Involvement Committee, I'd like to move that we approve, I don't think we have any notices of intent, 1 through 22, with notices of intent being 19, 20, 21, and 22. That's in global.
Number 22 is a read.
It's a read?
Yes, sir. If you'll read
It's
it.
a notice of intent and a read. I apologize.
Mr. Bayer, will you read it for the record?
22. On the motion of Mr. Bennett, seconded by Ms. Dastug, the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee recommends that the board approve as a notice of intent revisions to Bulletin 1706, Regulations for Implementation of the Children with Exceptionalities Act, Subpart 1, Regulations for Students with Disabilities, Chapter 1, State Eligibility, Subchapter F, Students with Disabilities enrolled by their parents in private schools, 133, expenditures related to the implementation of Act 515 of the 2010 regular legislative session, agenda item 4D5, page 55. Department staff quoted 2 omissions that existed in the presented notice of intent, and Ms. Buquet requested that the omissions be included and presented to board for approval at its meeting on August 18, 2011. With no further business to come before the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee, the meeting was adjourned at 4:35.
Thank you, Mr. Bayard. Thank you, Mr. Bayard. I'm going to hold on that item and ask for a second to your motion to approve items 1 through 21, noting 20 and 21 are notice of intent. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any opposition to that motion? Hearing none, motion carries. We go back to item 22. It has been read. I think Ms. Buquet had requested a couple of technical corrections. Are you satisfied with those corrections?
Yes, I am, and I move adoption.
Thank you. Ms. Buquet moves adoption of item 22. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Any opposition to that motion? Hearing none, motion carries.
Thank the staff for doing it. Thank you.
Excuse me. You want?
I wanted to thank the staff for the additions. Thank you.
Thank you. So item 22 is adopted.
Ms. Bouquet.
Ms. Johnson.
On the second page, I think they, under II, they may need to add the word be. May be expelled.
I'm sorry. Say that again?
The highlighted portion here.
Yes.
Maybe
Okay, that'll be noted.
Because it's going as an NOI.
Okay, that'll be noted.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that concludes the this committee. We go to the next.
Item 9B, Administration and Finance Committee, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I move approval of items number 1 through 65, noting that number 25 is a read.
Okay, we go to item 25. Will you read, please, Ms. Johnson?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me get back.
Oh, no, let's go ahead and get a second to approve Ms. Johnson's motion excluding item 25. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any opposition to that motion? Hearing none, motion carries. We now go to item 25. Ms. Johnson.
On motion of Ms. Gibbons, seconded by Mr. Lee, the Administration and Finance Committee recommends that the board defer until the board meeting the following contract that is in excess of $50,000. Contractor, Teach for America, Inc. Was it a previous contract? Yes. The contract amount is $9,868,468. The period is 9/1/11 to 6/30/12. The fund is the state Teach for America program, Teach for America flow through. This is a sole source. The contractor will train and place approximately 550 teachers, Teach for America core teachers in Louisiana public schools for the 2011-2012 year. The contractor will also support and provide professional development opportunities to the teachers and will recruit applicants for openings in the new school year.
Okay, thank you. Is there any action on this item?
I'd like to move to defer on this item.
Okay, I have a motion to defer. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to defer on this item.
How long are we deferring for?
Until October, if you.
Next BESE meeting.
Next BESE meeting.
I have some serious concerns about this particular item, and I sent to the person who's in charge of it. We had a contract last year in December for $900,000+ that I thought would last a year. We have a contract that was being offered for $968,000 that would last a year. We need to know the following. How many districts are using Teach for America teachers? How many Teach for America teachers are out there? And I would like to get some cost information, because to me, this is a couple of $1 million plus the districts pay a portion of this. And if we have and they've been doing it 10 years. That's in an email that I got back on this. I think we need some accountability, some transparency, accountability on the numbers. Right now, as I appreciate it, in the district that I live in, it's very true. They have had to cut some of their employees because of budget cuts that are currently occurring. So is it realistic for us to spend this kind of money to recruit people in a state that the Estimating Education Committee says we have a surplus of educators in? And I'm very, very concerned. And yes, I love Teach for America, so it is not about that. I even sent them a student named Lancia Walker. So it's not about that. It's about the accountability of it, and it is about what we're trying to do here. And it's also about, do we need to spend all of these dollars when we've been told we have a surplus of teachers?
Ms. Johnson, I think these are similar to the conversation that occurred yesterday, and one of the reasons for deferral is to actually bring a sort of programmatic kind of report to the board in October. It will not, I'm guessing, show up in finance. It's going to show up in probably school innovation and turnaround, but it will happen in October, the same month that you're asked to approve the contract will come back to finance. Is that meet BESE members' satisfaction?
Madam President?
Ms. Gibbons.
I didn't hear the first part of what Ms. Johnson has requested, but I believe that I asked also that we have a report that includes cohort information, so that we get a record over time of the retention rates in Louisiana of these people once they have completed their 2-year tenure with Teach for America. We have a report that tells us, or I have an email that tells me 65% of the people who have come through Teach for America are still in the state of Louisiana. And if that's the case, then they may be some of the people that are being surplus. And so certainly, do we want to reinvest in new people when old people who have gone through this program are no longer employed in the state? And I think I heard the end of Ms. Johnson's list. Rain, did I tell you anything else? Is that everything we've talked about so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and Ms. Martin, I think it would be appropriate for you to reach out to Ms. Johnson, Ms. Gibbons, and we'll actually send an email to all BESE members if they have anything specific that they want to see in the October report. so that they have an opportunity to communicate that to you. And you could check and see the direction you're heading is addressing that.
Absolutely.
She already has, Ms.
Okay.
One final thing for the record, because when we originally started this program, it was to place teachers in hard-to-place places and like in the Delta area. That was one of the places that we were looking at. So I'd like to know how many are actually placed and working in the hard-to-place area. And I'm talking geographically, not subject matter.
Thank you for those clarifications, and we'll get that information to you well in advance of the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Romer.
I think Ms. Johnson's questions are very legitimate, and it'll be a good report to get. I do think we'd be remiss not, however, to acknowledge there's been a great deal of great work done by Teach for America, and I'm not saying it's universal and every experience has been good, but I know there's been a tremendous number of very good experiences using Teach for America. I also do know they did send a number of kids to the Delta region. Not all of them were placed, but not at the fault of Teach for America. So the report is adequate, is certainly relevant, and I'm glad she asked for it, but I didn't want this moment to pass without acknowledging that, in fact, our state has benefited a great deal from many of these teachers, and I want to thank them for the effort they put in.
Madam President?
Okay, I'm gonna hold to commenting twice on any one item after this item. Ms. Givens.
First
And then
of
Ms.
all,
Buquet.
let me say that it is not my intent to impugn the reputation of Teach for America. But at a time when we are being told that we have surplus teachers and that we have few dollars, we need to look at how to best spend our money. That is not Ms. Johnson's intent, Mr. Roman, nor is it mine. And we are all aware of the work that Teach for America does. However, we do have a fiscal responsibility to the state of Louisiana. The other thing that you mentioned that I had not thought of is that where there have been placement offers and we were not able to fill them because of circumstances beyond TFA's control, we need to be made aware of those as well, so that perhaps as the Board of Education we can serve as a bridge to facilitate some of these difficulties. I was not aware that we are not always able to place other than we didn't have anybody to put in the position. But if there are some other barriers that are hindering Teach for America and the New Teacher Project from placing their students or class members, we need to know what those are so that we can work to alleviate some of that in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Givens. Ms. Buquet.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think it's part of the report, too. In all fairness, we certainly, since we want the best teachers possible for our students, I'd appreciate if you'd work with Dr. Noel and get his report on the data that shows the most successful teachers and from where they come. We have those reports as part of the college report, and we know you heard yesterday as we worked with ULL because they were at the bottom of the list on what they were doing. We also want to recognize that TFA has been at the top of many lists, and I think on any report that is very important for us to look at because it directly affects, of course, and reflects our students' numbers and our SPS scores. So we must look at that too. The other thing is I keep hearing that we have a surplus of teachers. I think that was a little taken out of context from one of the reports we heard yesterday. I don't want anyone to think that we have a surplus of teachers across the board because we certainly do not. We have areas in which we definitely have need for more teachers, specialized teachers. So we have to be very careful how we think about the fact that we have
We're
a
not going to be
surplus
having
of
a
teachers.
dialogue.
It's not across the board.
Okay.
So all that will come back in the report, and that's my turn. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Buquet. I do also, if you're looking at retention data, I think that there should be a comparison to retention to maybe teachers that come out of a traditional school. So just having a retention kind of statistic, I think by itself won't be that meaningful.
Madam Chairman.
Mr. Garvey.
Yeah, one more item I would like to suggest for the report is whether or not these Teach for America teachers are being placed more often than the average teacher in hard-to-place subjects, because my understanding is that they are. And if they are, I think that's another point that we need to be able to consider.
Ms. Gibbons, do you have a question?
Right. It may be a point of clarification. Yesterday, we received information about the teacher estimating conference.
No, that's coming up later in the agenda.
Right, but I
Okay.
just want to ask Rain if at some point you could give us a definition of what that conference is. Because I know in Orleans Parish, we have a teacher surplus, and I believe in Baton Rouge, there's also a surplus.
Okay.
So it may be that it's an area aberration, but I really would like to know what that teacher estimating conference was talking about, because that's not just a number, that's just not a statement I pulled out of my hat.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I think we've had plenty of discussion on this item. There's a proper motion and second to defer. Is there any opposition to deferring this item?
Yeah, one final thing. They need to give a timeline, and I'm saying this because the original request used to come, I believe, at the December meeting, and so now we're 9 months in it. So we need to know, is this a yearly thing, and what the year is?
We need the contract timeframes. Often the approval dates don't coincide with the contract dates. Ms. Johnson, you brought that to our attention many times. So we need the clarification of that. Okay. Hearing no further discussion, no opposition, this motion carries. Next committee.
Item 9C, Educator Effectiveness Committee, Mr. Lee.
On behalf of the Educator Effectiveness Committee, I move approval of items 1 through 18 in Globo, noting that items 8 through 14, with the exception of item 11, are notices of intent.
Second.
And then there will be a read item after this.
Okay, is there a motion? I have a motion and a second to approve Mr. Lee's the minutes of the Educator Effectiveness Committee. Is
Second.
I have a second. I have a third now. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Mr. Lee, for your read.
For the read item, Ms. Gibbons offered a motion, second by Mr. Romer, that the Educator Effectiveness Committee recommend that the board grant the request from Ms. Marcia Hardy Brown for a hearing regarding the issuance of a Louisiana teaching certificate appropriate to her credentials. Not sure why I need to read it, but I read it. I have to make a motion to deny.
There has to be a motion to deny. So
Yes.
I move to deny.
Thank you. We need a motion to deny to make this technically correct. By Mr. Garvey, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Johnson. Is there any opposition to the motion?
I'm trying to understand where we are. I thought we were reading a notice of intent. What's the number?
No, it's not.
It does not have it's not numbered, but it's after item 18.
It's the last paragraph on page 4 of the minutes. There is, this is a technical correction that expresses the intent of the committee, and that was the motion on the floor is to deny the hearing. I have a proper motion and second. Is there any opposition to the motion?
That we deny the hearing?
Deny the hearing. Are you opposed, Ms. Gibbons?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Please note Ms. Gibbons is being opposed. Motion carries. Next item.
Just a note, Mr. Bayard is abstaining from a vote on the Admin and Finance Committee minutes from all motions.
Say that again?
I didn't understand what she said.
Mr. Bayard is abstaining from approval of on the motion to approve the minutes from the Administration and Finance Committee for all motions.
Okay. Make sure it's noted in the minutes.
I'm abstaining from the committee report.
Okay.
Voting on the committee report.
Then you shouldn't have had to sit through it.
Too many concerns or questions will be here for 3 hours. So.
Item 9D, School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, Mr. Romer.
On behalf of School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, I'd like to move for approval of items 1 through 13, withholding 14 for a read, and noting that 11 and 12 are NOI.
Okay, I have a motion on all items but number 14. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Garvey. Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. Number 14.
Item 14, on motion of Mr. Garvey, seconded by Ms. Johnson, the School Innovation and Turnaround Committee deferred until August 18, 2011. Board meeting agenda item 4B1, considerations of revisions to the 2011 charter school request for application as follows. A, allow for the revision and resubmission of applications per Act 213 of the 2011 regular session. And B, insert an additional timeline for the receipt of application materials from applicants seeking to operate specified RSD schools. That was item 4B1. With no further, oops.
Okay, that's it. Ms. Bentley.
Thank you. We're just seeking clarification on the motion that was made by Ms. Johnson yesterday for a request for an Attorney General's opinion on TRSL. Our understanding from the conversations yesterday was that the board wanted an AG's opinion on two things regarding charter schools being able to withdraw.
I think you're on the wrong item, Ms. Bentley.
That's a different item, actually.
Yeah.
I will quickly say 14 we deferred because of the time issue.
Right. We're on 14.
And 14 has to do with, and I'm sure when Ms. Bentley gets to it, she can explain it better than I, but it's just changing our application process so that it matches up with changes in statute.
Yeah, we're on item 14.
And I apologize. If there's an opportunity to revisit number 2, we'd like to just get some additional clarification.
Let's cover 14, and then if we want to go back, we can pull 2 separately, I believe.
Okay, number 14.
14, Ms. Bentley, I don't know if you want to explain it better than I, but.
Sure. Number 14 is a request for an amendment to a charter, and this was a result of us discovering something over the past couple of days, actually. As this school enrolled a kindergarten class, and looking through their documentation, we noticed a discrepancy between their enrollment table, which was part of their contract, and what was in their original approved application. The problem was they had applied originally to include a kindergarten class, and that was part of their charter that had been approved by the board, but when the contract was executed, that kindergarten class did not show up in their enrollment table. They have, in accordance with their approved charter application, enrolled a kindergarten class this year, and so we need to now make that necessary adjustment to ensure that the approved application matches their enrollment table in their approved charter application. So the amendment that is before you now is to make that correction, to allow the contract to reflect what was actually in their approved charter application.
Are you talking to 14?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, she's speaking to 14.
Well, it's 14. Maybe
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is not 14.
I didn't think so. It's not 14.
I apologize.
Are
I
you
didn't
on
mean to
an
confuse
emergency
anyone.
agenda?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
This is 14, the charter RFA.
Oh, okay. Let's park that. See if we get you on the agenda. We're on 14 and the school improvement and turnaround. Let's take a break for a second and let's regroup. Everybody, we're on the school and improvement. I think we know where we are, right?
We're
14. Okay.
I thought we were on the minutes.
We are on the minutes.
I think what this did, and I'll let them get their ducks in a row, but I believe we had some, if you remember last few times we went through the process, some issue of charter schools wanting a chance to get feedback from the review committee and then being able to resubmit, and I believe there was legislation passed to that effect, and I think this was to make our policy align with that legislation.
That's correct. Raphael Gang with the department. The current legislation that was passed during this current legislative session allows for charters to essentially submit additional information at the request of the department through the application process. We wanted to make sure that our request for applications was aligned with the legislation, and this would allow. So what will happen from this point on is that the applications will be submitted. August 26th is the current deadline for most of the applications. Once those applications are submitted, we will be sending them out to our external independent reviewers. Those reviewers are going to read through the applications, make notes, ask questions to each other. They'll also be working together in groups as a group of reviewers to explore those questions and see what they're interested in learning more about. At a point before the interview process starts, the reviewers will send, or our office will send the reviewers' feedback to the applicants, letting them know areas that they're interested in learning more information about or areas for clarification. At that point, the applicants will have the opportunity to resubmit new information that will help to clarify and give the reviewers the information they need, so that on interview day, the conversation can be really about the content of the application, not trying to learn more about what the application needs to be, or if there wasn't areas that were addressed as fully as the reviewers wanted them to be.
Excuse me, but what item are you addressing?
He is addressing the right item. Item 14 is the school improvement
Mr.
turnaround
Romer,
committee.
own this committee.
Okay. And it's actually, I will make a motion to approve item 14, both A and B. It's actually a very good item. If you remember the frustration that applicants had, which was they would basically get feedback with no chance to respond to the feedback because of the timeline of the process and how we did our process. And there was a great deal of frustration on a number of applicants who said if we had had an opportunity to address these weaknesses, we think we could have satisfied the reviewer. I think many members here were sympathetic to that sentiment, but we didn't have the mechanism yet to allow for it. So what this does is allow for the applicant to get earlier feedback on where there may be perceived weaknesses in their application and a chance to address those weaknesses, and do so within our timeline.
Madam President,
Okay,
I'll make the motion to approve the amendment, but this is my question and why I'm confused. I've had several people talk to me about alternative schools. Patrick?
Yeah.
Is this the item that you are talking about in reference to the alternative schools, Patrick?
No. So there are two, Ms. Gibbons, there are two items for this amendment. The first is regarding what Mr. Romer has been discussing, which is the amendment to the RFA to allow.
What we're talking about.
Right. And then there's a second item, which is B, which is relates to allowing for applicants who are interested in specifically alternative high schools in the New Orleans area to be able to submit applications. So there are two separate issues there. We're happy to discuss the alternative high school question.
And that's why I'm confused, because I'm waiting to talk about Part B.
Yeah.
Okay, well, they're together, so why don't we talk about Part B right now, Ms. Gibbons?
I move for approval of both. So.
Okay.
Well, can I amend your motion and move for approval of A and let's go into B?
They're together as one. You don't. Are you gonna?
I don't support B.
Okay, well then, Mr. Romer, it's your call. Okay, so will you amend your motion to approve 14A?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second.
And a second by Ms. Buquet already. Thank you, though, Mr. Lee. All in favor of approval of 14A?
Now, on to Part B.
Motion carries. Ms. Gibbons on 14B.
All right. The motion as it reads says that you want to insert an additional timeline for the receipt of application materials from applicants seeking to operate specified RSD schools. And as the two of you have explained to me, Aaron and Patrick, you are concerned about alternative schools in the New Orleans area. The way this reads and what you talked about don't seem like it's the same thing. So what exactly is it that you need to accomplish to accommodate operators of alternative schools?
Sure, and I'll just give a brief introduction, and Patrick can explain further from the RSD. But the RSD had approached us with this item requesting some flexibility with the timelines that are in the current 2011 charter school RFA, because since Superintendent White has assumed the superintendency there and assembled a team that has been very much working on restructuring and turning around schools that are still struggling, including the alternative high schools in New Orleans. They have been in conversations with different providers, different operators, urging them, ones that have been effective in other states, urging them to consider also coming to New Orleans and assisting in turning around some of these schools. And so they believe that they have some interest by some good providers, but at this time, since the current RFA has deadlines that have already passed for applicants to submit their letter of intent or their eligibility documents, they would not be able to apply now to open schools next year. They would actually have to wait another year. So the RSD requested a change to the current RFA to allow for operators who would apply to operate alternative high schools to be able to go ahead and basically get into this current cycle submit their letter of intent, submit their eligibility documents so that we can let them be a part of this year's cycle so that they don't have to sit out an entire year.
My concern, other than the other objections that I had, which include a real discussion of what's going on with these alternative schools in New Orleans anyway, because we don't know I don't know how many there are. I don't know who their operators are. You're having trouble placing them in schools without the community support, and yet you say we need to have more alternative schools. So that means there must be some projection as to why we need these schools. On the other side, I need to have a legal opinion to tell me whether or not once you have announced a cycle as we are in the middle of, you can amend it to accommodate a specific type of provider without amending it as to all kinds of providers.
Okay, Ms. Givens, I'm going to let Mr. Dobard
Yes,
respond to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. Patrick Dobard, Deputy Superintendent of Community and Policy for the Recovery School District. Ms. Givens, I'll try to answer your first question. We have one alternative school, Schwartz, but we also have two accelerated programs in Renew schools, which are basically for kids who are extremely behind and they're seeking this second opportunity. When we talk about the RSD Direct Run Schwartz, what happened with Schwartz last year with the Recovery School District, they made a policy decision to take in students at the school, not exclusively for kids fighting and that sort of thing. So the numbers significantly shrank. And what the RSD did was, last year, was to make certain that for those kids that were in Schwartz, they realized that they were putting too many students in, again, for instances at schools where it just swelled the numbers and it was just real difficult to manage. And so out of that, the school has shrunk, and then we've done an internal study of our schools strategically to say what can we do to move forward for our most needy students, the most at-risk students. And so we reached out to groups in the community right now, such as Circle of Courage. I'm sure you're familiar with Khalil Osiris. And so for those kids with those what we might consider minor infractions, they're actually being mentored by these groups on Saturdays, and so that's reduced the number in Schwartz. But at the same time, the performance of the school academically, even though it's the most challenging kids to deal with, it's just abysmal. And so what we decided was that we needed to try to bring in real strong, proven providers and give them the opportunity. And then when our team saw that the timeline had passed, thus we figured that we could take a shot at trying to have this amended to give opportunity to those individuals who really feel can turn the school around and put it on stable ground. So we have reached out to the community, as you mentioned, in a meaningful way. Folks are working with the school and those kids that will go there otherwise, or that really wouldn't be referred there. And we continue to look for other partnerships. So, you know, we're real committed to, we made a commitment coming out of our 100-day plan, which we're almost done with on August 23rd, to say that our most needy kids deserve the priority from us. And so we're trying to deal with them in an equitable manner, and this is a step towards doing that. So we would just ask approval so we can allow these potential providers to participate in the process.
Madam President, as I shared with both Patrick and Aaron, we had decided once before that we were going to bring outside providers in to run that school, and I think that was 3 years ago, and it was an abysmal failure. We had a lot of problems in the administration of that contract, and while I understand that you may want to bring another provider in or look at applications for other providers for the coming school year, and therefore try to bring them in under this timeline, I'm concerned that we don't have a clear-cut definition and policy as to alternative schools, because you are putting all kinds of kids in these alternative programs. And I think that board members, even if we grant this timeline, we need to create some guidelines as to what alternative schools need to look like and who goes to these alternative schools. Because as you said, you've got kids that are involved in criminal matters, being groups with children who are involved in behavioral infractions that have caused them to be released. We also have a problem in Orleans with children who are being expelled to the streets. So we really do need to have a comprehensive alternative education strategy. And I'm not so sure that just because you think you found a provider and you want to change the timelines, that that's going to be a comprehensive program. So board members, I guess what I'm suggesting then is that if it's the will of the board, this timeline can be altered if that's legally allowed. Because again, I don't know that you can change the timeline for one group without changing it for everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Givens.
I have a question.
I'd just like to make a couple comments, if I may. This is This is approving a timeline and an application, not approving an alternative school. So this would come back to the board. We have new leadership in the Recovery School District, and so I think there is a reasonable expectation that two things. One is we learn from our experiences, Ms. Gibbons, and two, that a different new leadership might do this. No, my turn. It might do this differently. I think those two things need to be on the table. And for that, we do have some abysmal results in our alternative schools that, and I think this could benefit children in New Orleans. For that, I am going to be supportive of 14B. Ms. Johnson.
My concern, when we looked at this, basically, if you read what is on here, it does not indicate from yesterday that we were handling two different things. I'm concerned about this process. And now we have two things and we're combining them into one. And I have a real issue with supplemental information response due October 17th, which can be interpreted to me as you wrote an application, it was really no good, submit another one. I can't support this. I mean, this just doesn't make sense to me. And you tied both of these things together. They're two separate issues. One is that you were trying to allow people, which I agree, if I have something in my application that needs further clarity, that's an issue, all of it by itself, to allow people to do that. Then you have tied this to alternative schools, and when we read it yesterday, it didn't have anything to do with that. So I have a real problem with that.
Question.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bayard.
Yes, this is just a general comment on alternative schools, which could be applicable.
Speak up, Mr. Bayard, please.
Yes, a general comment on alternative schools.
Okay.
I find alternative schools have a myriad of student types. We have kids in the juvenile system who are clearly pre-adjudicated. They are on the verge of being adjudicated. That's where their life seems to be destined. And I'm not sure that type of format is healthy for that student or the other students. The day is going to have to come where we begin to identify students better for alternative schools and possibly separate them and have more than one type of alternative school. Because each and every student is treated and tested the same way as a regular student. I was on a roll. And, well, not identically, but if you follow my drift. And I think those days are coming. I have an idea that hopefully will come to pass in the future about how to better educate alternative kids and keep them out of dropout status.
Okay, thank you, Thank you, Mr. Bayard. Superintendent Tyler, and then let's try to move on this item.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to ask Ms. Benedley if she would respond to item 14A, and I would like to also just say to the board that last year when we went through the process, we understood, and we thought we understood, that the board wanted us to consider revisions for charter applications. We were following through on what we thought the board asked us to do last year. As a result of that, we have a statute that was passed for the 2011 legislative session that permits us to actually do what we're asking the board today to approve.
Thank you.
Aaron, do you have?
And that's absolutely right. Last year, if you'll recall, we had a very long meeting in which we considered many charter school applications, and at one point during that meeting, charter applicants reminded us of an existing law that allowed for the revision and resubmission of charter school applications. The reason we were not able to do that in last year's cycle is because the way the law is written, and this is not only for charter school applications submitted to BESE, it also applies to charter applications submitted to local school boards, is that you only have a certain window of opportunity in which to receive applications, have them evaluated, and have either the local school board or BESE render a decision. There's often no time at the end to allow applicants whose applications have been rejected to make revisions, resubmit, have them reevaluated, and that's an additional cost to us and to local school boards. So at that point, the board directed us to find a more useful solution, to find a way to allow applicants to get some feedback on the deficiencies in their proposals, make changes within the same application process so that we didn't have to allow for time and money to reevaluate different proposals. So that's exactly what we did. We came up with a solution to that problem. We worked with an author to submit a bill during this past legislative session, and it was approved. It's now law. We have to allow for it. So we have made the corresponding changes in our current charter school RFA. We included this item with the other item because they both involve changes to the charter school application.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bentley. At this point, the chair would entertain a motion on item 14B.
I'll move approval.
I have a motion to approve by Mr. Romer. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Buquet. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Please note Ms. Givens is being opposed.
I'm opposed.
Oh, and Ms. Okay.
I'm opposed to the process.
Okay. Well, then.
You all just gave us this. And I just had a chance to read step number 8, which does address what we were trying, I think it's 8. That does address what we were trying to get to last year, but you just gave it to us.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. The motion carries. Next item.
Item 10.
Oh, wait, I believe actually on my agenda, Ms. Bentley needed clarification on item.
Is there any other item that you need clarification on? No.
We
Okay.
consulted with staff, and I think
You
we're
okay?
fine. Thank you.
Then that concludes.
Okay, then let's go, yes. You want to have a roll call?
Are you going to address the other part? I don't think you heard what I said. I said that I had no problems if the board also directed that office to develop a more comprehensive approach to alternative education in all these parishes. We still don't have that. And there is still the problem of children who are being expelled from school, being sent to alternative schools in which they are in class with juvenile offenders.
Ms. Johnson, Ms. Givens, if you want the board department to address that, the Recovery School District to address that item, we need to build it into the agenda. It is not encompassed in this item.
Now, where do I put it in the agenda?
Get with Ms. Posniak to do a receive and refer into the recovery, it will be the School Innovation Turnaround Committee.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Posniak?
Okay, so do we have a clear vote? Yes. We do. Okay, that concludes this agenda. We go to the next item.
Item 10, Board Advisory Council reports. Item 10A, Non-Public School Commission.
Mr. Bennett? Okay, anybody else? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Thank you. I need a first. Thank you by Mr. Garvey, second by Mr. Lee. Mr. Bennett's not here to make it. It's his honorary motion. Next item.
Item 10B, Superintendent's Advisory Council.
Now, Mr. Lee.
Move approval.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mr. Lee. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Geist. Any opposition to that motion? Hearing none, motion carries.
Item number 11, Board Advisory Council appointments. If you'd like to turn to
Move approval.
tab 11.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lee. We have a motion, a second by Mr. Garvey. Any opposition to that motion? Motion carries.
Item 12A, receive the resolution from the Beauregard. Oh, sorry, A and B. We're going to take those together.
I got Mr. Geist as a maker of the motion and a second by Mr. Lee. Any opposition? So moved.
We'll move now to item 13. Receive the resolution from Iberia Parish School Board, and you will find that item under tab 13 in your binder.
Is there a motion to receive? Item 13.
No, actually, I'm sorry. It's in your emergency agenda.
Emergency
packet.
agenda. Item 13A, is there a motion to receive? Thank you, Mrs. Givens. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lee. Any opposition? I do recommend that you read it. It's quite clever. Next item.
Item 14, consideration of the minutes of the AG public hearing held on August 17, 2011.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. Is there a second by Mr. Lee? Any opposition to item 14? So moved. Next item.
Item 15, consideration of the appointment of Mr. Soren Lagarde to the position of Manager of Data, Media, and Special Projects for the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, effective August 15, 2011.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lee, and second by Ms. Buquet, and welcome. Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. Welcome, Mr. Lagarde.
Item
Next
number
item.
16, consideration of contracts and leases as recommended by the LDE for the LDE and board agencies. The recommendation is to approve.
I have a question,
Okay, can I get a motion on the floor first?
not for me.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Buquet. Second?
Second.
Thank you, second by Mr. Lee. Now, Ms. Givens.
Why is this on the emergency agenda?
Okay, we need somebody from the department.
Good morning, Rain Martin, Office of Innovation. That's a great question, and the reason is because this project is funded largely through the $9.2 million Gates grant that we were lucky enough to receive probably about 45 days or so ago. We weren't able to go through with the contracting process until we actually had gotten the funds for it.
Wait. Maybe you're looking at one thing and I'm looking at something else. I'm looking at contract item 16, is that what we're on, or 17? 16.
Right.
You're saying that all of these leases, 10 pages of leases, are dependent on a grant?
I must be on the wrong.
I think so.
We're on page
Item.
2 of the emergency agenda. Item.
Okay. Yeah, we're on
It says
different-
contracts and
all right.
leases, but it's a contract.
It's a contract. We're on
Yes.
different things. I'm looking at the leases.
Okay.
I'll hold my comment till the leases
Okay,
come.
so-
Don't move.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second to approve items 1 and 2. Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Item 17, consideration of contracts and leases as recommended by the LDE for the LDE and board agencies, Recovery School District. The recommendation is to approve.
Okay, let me get a motion on the floor, and then we'll go from there. Thank you, Ms. Buquet. Second by Mr.
Don't leave.
Mr. Romer. I have a proper motion and second, a question by Ms. Givens.
Yes, all right. Oh, it's Patrick. Well, I don't know who she works for. I mean, you know, y'all just finished telling me it's all the Department of Education, so. Why is this on the emergency agenda?
Yes, ma'am. The reason is that we are currently working with the University of New Orleans to get new office space and an estimate on a 9-month lease. But as we were working with them, we recently found out that the space that UNO is working with us on won't be available to September 1st. So it was just a timing issue. We thought we were going to have everything finalized. It wouldn't have to renew, but timing was thrown off. And so we're just asking for the board's approval to get 9-month extension on the original lease, all of the same terms. And by that time, the work with UNO will be complete, and we'll be able to make that move.
So you need, I thought we just approved the lease on the Poland Street property.
That we just approved it? Well, no, we need an extension on it, so basically that's what we're asking for.
How much is that lease a year?
No, let's do
I'll
it.
have to ask Bob.
Oh, no, we're going to finish. He's here doing the education stuff.
So we pay $38,000 a month to lease that space?
And all through FEMA dollars. Yes,
I
Bob?
don't care who
No,
pays
we're gonna
for it, it's
finish
still
the
money.
Absolutely.
I don't care whose money it is. I pay taxes there too. I'm sorry.
We can't hear you.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm sorry. $18 a square foot.
So that's
Yeah,
about
the lease is-
$38,000 and change for the
Per-
Poland.
Yes, for.
18,000 a year.
No,
18,000.
No, it's 349,000 for the 9
for
month
9
lease.
months. That's $38,878. How much is the, yes, for the Poland Street
For our
office?
central office on
For our
Poland Ave.
central office on Poland.
And so how much will you, when you
Okay,
move to UNO, what will the rent there be?
I haven't been told that yet. I'm hoping it's going to be in the $12 range.
Yeah, it's going to be less than what the amount we're
It'll be
paying now.
much less. I mean, a
How
third
can,
less.
you don't know what, you're gonna move, but you don't know what your rent is. Call me. I
Okay,
got your
okay.
office.
We'll give you the specific, but
Yeah.
we know it's considerably less, and that's why we were working with the universities. We went to SUNO, we went to Dillard. They didn't have the spaces, and, you know, we were trying to find where someone would do it free, but UNO's, we're working on an actual much lower price.
And then with 2 and 3, the Centino Early Childhood Academy and the Wilcox Academy of Early Learning, I'm just trying to figure out, why is this an emergency?
May I ask just one question since you?
Okay.
What's the going rate per
Wait,
square
Ms.
foot?
Johnson, let's let Mr. Dobart answer, Ms. Givens, and then you can ask your question.
On that particular, next item, we asked,
Yes.
I'm not looking at that particular item in front of me. I had the lease information, Ms. Gibbons, but I believe that was the one where it was the federal carryover, and that the feds just approved the fact that we could expend money that otherwise we didn't believe we had the ability to do so. And so we just needed to put on an emergency agenda because the basic timeline had
The
passed,
contract
yes.
start dates are,
So it's just
are
to be
between
able to
now and the
use-
next meeting.
Exactly. And so I believe that was handled in another committee as well,
Okay.
specifically on those sites.
Okay.
Tell me why it's on the emergency.
Because the federal government, they basically gave us the, we just found out, yes
Oh,
ma'am, about a week or
Okay,
two ago.
okay,
That's
thank
the
you.
reason, yes.
Ms. Johnson, do you have a question?
I have two questions. What's
Okay.
the going rate per square foot for office space in the city of New Orleans?
Oh, I would have to find that out for you,
I
ma'am.
can answer that question. But y'all ought to know that. I mean, when you're spending money, that's something.
I understand, but we have our operations team, and I apologize, Ramsey Green was ill and couldn't make it today. He's over operations, I'll be certain to get you that figure.
Yesterday, we approved $800,000 for the Head Start project. That's what the request was for us.
It was
to
a request for
allow them
authority, yes.
To get up to 800,000. That's what the request was. But Madam President.
No, let Ms. Johnson finish her question,
I want
please.
to answer her question.
She hasn't even finished asking it.
But
One second.
But in these two items here, especially in the first item,
Just a
it is
second.
like we already have something going on and we are amending, and we're going from 148 to 190 something. But yesterday we gave authority for, my understanding of what we were doing yesterday was that none of these dollars had been committed to anybody until we gave authority to use them. This is telling me that that's not true.
Okay, Ms. Johnson. Do you have an answer? Because I think Ms. Gibbons is willing
Yeah,
to
and I
answer.
don't know if that's just, something technical in there, Ms. Johnson. I'm not looking at it, obviously, what you have, but we can see certainly whether it's authority or something otherwise. But we do know that the timing was just thrown off, and it was welcomed, actually, because it's going to allow us to do something much better for kids and otherwise be able to expend dollars that we didn't believe we had the ability to do so. So if there's something programmatically on there, we'll make certain that everything is cleared and we'll get the proper people to respond to it.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Johnson? Okay, so is there a motion on this item?
I still have an answer from Ms.
Okay,
Johnson.
Ms. Gibbons would like to answer your question. Well, she
Um,
received an answer.
No, she did not, for what I want to tell her.
Okay.
$18 per square foot for a office space. And that office space, I believe, would be B or C. And I think, and we said it before, that we're paying a lot of money for maybe B or C office space.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gibbons. There's a motion and a second to approve this item. Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Item 18, consideration of a material amendment to KIPP New Orleans Leadership Academy, chartered by KIPP New Orleans Incorporated.
Okay.
The recommendation is to approve.
Okay, is there a motion to approve? Thank you, Ms. Buquet. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Garvey. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. We go to the final item on the agenda.
Item number 19, consideration of a presentation from the Education Estimating Conference regarding student enrollment and other education-related projections.
Okay.
And board members, materials are being distributed to you right now.
I feel the whoosh. Hello. We're ready for you whenever you are.
Thank you, Madam President, for having us here today, and board members. I'm Stafford Palmieri. I'm actually here in a perhaps different capacity than you see me usually in the audience, and that is as the chair of the Education Estimating Conference. We asked to come today to just briefly explain to you who we are and what we do. Right now, the EEC is doing sort of an internal review of its own efficacy, and we wanted to reach out to policymaking bodies like yourselves that could potentially benefit from the numbers that we consider, and wanted to just sort of expose you very briefly today. I don't think we're going to have enough time to really have a conversation about some of the numbers we've just handed out to you, but just to expose you briefly to the numbers that we do consider. So the EEC was created at the same time as the REC, which you are perhaps more familiar with, the Revenue Estimating Conference, as well as a number of other estimating conferences that were the purpose was to project different numbers that affected budgetary decisions. The EC and the REC are the only two that are still meeting. And it is made up of 5 people by law, a member of the House Legislative Staff, a member of the Senate Legislative Staff, a member of the Legislative Fiscal Office, a representative from Division of Administration, a representative from Department of Education, and a representative of the Governor's Office. And I just said 6 names, and that's because the Legislative Fiscal Office, I apologize for the confusion, is a non-voting member. So the 6 of us meet about 4 times a year, and we consider 5 projections. And I have here with me today Dr. Raymond Brady, who is the staff person for the conference, who completes those projections, and he's going to walk you through them briefly. And you should have a copy of the latest of each of the 5 types of projections that we do in front of you. And so you can follow along, and then at a later date, perhaps take a closer look at the information.
Good morning. The first item is the preliminary school district enrollment projection. So you should have that in front of you as far as discussion goes. Now, this item here.
Show us which one it is. Okay.
It would be item 4, but the title is called preliminary school district enrollment projections.
I apologize. The agenda items refer to our agenda, not to your agenda.
Yeah. So these are examples. Does everybody have?
It's item 4, BESE members. It's their item number 4.
Okay. In the process in which we do this here, actually, this is in the last item in the cycle of numbers that are produced. And what it is that this is done during the summer time, in which we produce what amounts to is the district 5-year projections, which are then sent to the districts for comments and review, which is consistent with the enabling legislation for the conference itself. Once those numbers are reviewed, which the review process is managed by the Department of Education, then we get the comments back, and we either we analyze them. In some cases, the comments are accepted because they make sense. For example, in some districts, we may have done a projection in which we didn't know there was going to be a new economic development project, which would have affected the school population over time. That's an important factor. In others cases, a lot of times there's just they don't like the numbers, and so that's really insufficient. The key here is that, strangely enough, in many respects, Louisiana is one of the few states in the union which produces a comprehensive system where all of the district projections are done with the same methodology, and therefore there's a consistency across, and they can be used effectively for what amounts to a budgeting and planning over time, because it's a 5-year planning cycle that we use, which is the cycle which all agencies use here. And so that's the first example right there of what is done. Do we have any questions on this?
Any questions, board members, of this report? Otherwise, Mr. Brady will.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Gibbons.
Aside from the fact that I've been here for 8 years, and this is the first time I've heard of the Education Estimating Conference.
That's why we're here today.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you are, but it has come as a total surprise to me that you exist. What I want to know is, if these are your estimates, and we get estimates from somebody else, whose numbers, where did we find out if the numbers are the same?
We use these.
The conference by law produces the official projections for the state. So any information which comes from another district or a district number is that district's number, but it's not the official number in which the state should be using that number.
Well, for example, we keep getting projections on the enrollment for Orleans Parish.
Right.
for the Recovery School District and OPSB from Greg Rigama.
Well,
So whose numbers do I believe, yours or theirs?
well, remember, we have, after these preliminary numbers are produced, what we do is that we send them out to the districts for review and comment, which is a 30-day review process. And this, again, is done by the Department of Education staff. If they have any sort of disagreement with the numbers, that's the time for them to say, we agree or disagree, and why. Once these are approved, they become the official numbers. And this is part of the problem here, which we're trying to create, which is a consistency over all of the parishes. So when we all talk about projections or enrollment numbers, we're all talking about the same numbers.
It makes sense to me. I'm just trying to understand why we are paying consultants to do these estimates, and I believe Mr. Rigama is very expensive when we have an estimating conference that does it as a matter of course.
Well, I
guess
can't
that's
answer
not
that
a question that you. I know
I don't
that's
think,
not a
yeah, I
question
don't think
you
we
can
are in a
answer.
position to answer that
No.
question.
I
Okay.
understand it, you are,
Thank you,
but
Ms.
it
Givens.
just occurs to me that it's strange.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Givens. Any other questions at this point in the presentation? If not, I'd like to point something out to Mr. Lee. If you look at the Table 1, the Louisiana average teacher salaries, budgeted for 2010-11 was $48,108, and actual was $49,656. I think that might reflect the what's happening in DeSoto Parish. So,
Well, of course, that's average. That's average teacher pay.
thank you. Yeah, we're going on to the next item.
Okay. The next item is, it has an agenda item 3 at the top. It's called Historical and Projected Preschool Population for the State of Louisiana
We just had this conversation.
and the under 5-year-old cohort populations. And this is what the document looks like here. It's hard to see this from that distance there. But it's item
Yes.
Historical and Projected Preschool is the top component. Okay, we do this, again, the evolution of these reports over time has changed based upon requests from either members of the conference or from individuals who work for the Department of Education. In this particular case here, we began this process in order for the preschool programs that are managed by the Department of Education. And we wanted to create a system where what amounts to is we had again, a consistent set of populations for the preschool group for each of the parishes, and then a state number for the 4-year-olds, which is an important factor here. And this is what this just reflects here. It's just that document there, and you can see it. Now, all of this stuff, of course, is going to, these numbers here are readjusted and updated and reevaluated when we get for example, we're getting in the 2010 census data for the new BESE years. And that's an important point with respect to the conference, is that after we do a projection, we go back the following year and we evaluate how well we did. So there's a constant process of what amounts to is updating and, if necessary, correcting things. It's not just simply producing the numbers and then forgetting about them and then going on to the same process. So that's the other document. The third one is I think some of you were talking about the average public school teacher salary estimates here. This process began. They actually.
That was on the first document.
They have some. This is enrollment data here, by the way. Yeah, so they stapled this together. What we do here is that we look at the SRB region, and we do a forecast, a 5-year forecast of the trend in average teacher pay against those states that are in the SREB region. From that, we determine whether Louisiana is at the average or below the average. and then we project that on a 5-year trend basis there. This particular type of projection has created somewhat controversy here because what occurs is that you will get comments, in my parish, the teachers aren't, the average isn't that. Or this other parish, it's higher than or less than. And the problem here, of course, is this is an average for the state. And more importantly, and we try to emphasize this when we go through the discussion, too often when we compare averages between states, we don't know whether the way the information is collected in Mississippi or Alabama or Delaware is exactly the same as the method that we use in Louisiana. The effect of which is that when you even look at national statistics from the National U.S. Department of Education, a lot of times we're really talking about apples and oranges, and yet everybody is using apples and oranges as a comparison. So it's always important to be cautious when looking at this data. But what we try to do here is to help the state determine whether our teachers are, in terms of their average salary, are as competitive as the neighboring states. We have Delaware, for example, part of this here, and obviously Delaware is not part of the region that will be affected, but we have Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, all of which are areas which could draw on our teachers in a competitive sense. So that's important information. So again, that's another document which is created and produced and updated on an annual basis.
I'd just like to jump in here and apologize that the wrong Excel spreadsheet is stapled on the back. And, oh, no, it is the very last page.
It's on 4.
Oh, yeah, it's the last page.
It's the very last page. And if you'll notice over in the far right column over here, this is the percentage of the SRAB that our salaries are today over here. And you'll see that we've been right at about 99 to 100% for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think the excellent point to be made here is that relative to our neighbors and those in the SREB region, Louisiana has really invested substantially more so in its teachers in terms of drawing up the average. Let me give you an example. 1994 to 1995, the Louisiana average as a percentage of the regional average was about 83%. The big changes began really in the Foster administration, where you began to see what amounts to is an upward increase there until we get to the Blanco administration, and then we have what amounts to is we've created parity. And, you know, whether we're going to maintain or not, that is a different issue there. What we're trying to do is show that if the trends continue, this is what will result. So it gives the policymaker an understanding of where we are in this discussion here.
Question.
Thank you. Mr. Bayard.
Maybe question, comment. First question is, you know, I've been to some of the revenue estimating conferences, hearings that you've had, and listened to comments, and this is a pretty in-depth demographic study for education, and I'm not sure I've ever seen this before, as Given said. Secondly, although our average salaries have shown an increase recently, the last 4 years, none of it has been due to state funding. We've had local school districts passing taxes for teacher salaries based on the faith of the taxpayers in that community. And they have stood up to help the school districts. So I want to differentiate between, because a salary for a teacher is comprised of more than one funding source. And so I think hats off to those local taxpayers who have faith in their schools. My next concern is where we're going to go with this. What's the future in this education estimating conference? Where we're going with it?
Well,
I'm actually going to get to that as soon as we get through the rest of the projections, and I'll tell you more specifically why we're here.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that if you don't mind, Mr. Bayard. I think the question will be answered.
Is that okay?
What this is simply showing you is the fact that if trends continue, this is what's going to probably happen. So this gives you, as a policymaker, a sense that, well, we have to change the trend, we like the trend, et cetera, what is necessary to do the following. So that's the only thing it is. The Education Estimating Conference is a data organization which provides you with information to better make a decision. The next document is the forecast of total demand for Louisiana public school teachers, which is a regular program, and special needs for the current period of time, a 5-year forecast period. And again, this document, we started this document within the last 3 years, partly because of requests from the Department of Education to help them to better define what's the demand. And we've had a lot of discussion in which they've made recommendations in terms of improving the process itself down to what amounts to is the planning areas. And so this is just what amounts to is just that. And we look at demand not simply in the context of what amounts to is the demand associated with student growth, but demand associated with what amounts to is retirement and replacement. And an important new part of this particular document here is we began to look at, if I can find it, okay.
Symphony.
We began to look at what amounts to is some of the data from the Department of Education. In this particular case here, if you look at Table 12,
Table 12, okay.
Table 12 in the document itself, it's entitled State of Louisiana Distribution of Public School Classroom Teachers by Years of Service. And although the data, in terms of looking at the cohort survival there, you only have two data, the 0 to 1 and the 2 to 3 year period of time. What it shows is that during this period of time, that about 31% of the teachers who began as a teacher in year 0 were there in year 2, which tells you basically that your dropout in the profession is about 1/3, close to 1/3. And the only reason why we began to we've been asked to really look at this more detailed over time to get a better understanding of how we're retaining teachers, because that's a very important point. Any questions? And then finally, for the TOPS program, we have a document called Projections of the Total Number of Louisiana High School Graduates. And we do this, and we provide this every year for the TOPS program, which includes what amounts to is public and private school graduates. We look at the age groups, and then we provide them with the information. And according to them, the projections over, if you compare them over a 6-year cycle, there's virtually no difference between what we projected and what in fact has happened.
So thank you for your attention. I know we just presented a lot of numbers to you, and I'm sure you will want to take them home and digest them. So back to Mr. Bayard's question as to why we're here. As I mentioned earlier, the EEC is sort of undertaking a self-analysis of its own efficacy. The budget process is heavily dependent on these numbers. The legislative staffs on both sides use these numbers when constructing the budget or working within the executive budget, and the Legislative Fiscal Office uses them for fiscal notes, and LOFSA uses them to project TOPS costs. And it seemed odd that there were other bodies that were policymaking bodies that were not using them or not even aware that they existed. So we're undergoing two sort of phases to this self-assessment of our own efficacy. One is that we wanted to make other other groups aware that we exist, that these numbers exist, and that they might be useful to them. And the second is to look at whether the numbers that we are projecting are actually useful. So that is what I'd actually like to invite you all to do, is to take a look at the numbers that we've presented, and your executive director has offered to coordinate your responses, but if you could provide any feedback on whether or not the numbers are helpful to you, if you don't find them helpful, how they could be more helpful, and to submit a letter to the Education Estimating Conference that we can take under consideration at our next meeting when we discuss more in depth the projections that we consider every year.
When is your next meeting?
It's in October.
October.
Madam President?
Ms. Givens.
Again, I'm shocked and amazed at the things I continue to learn as we work this process. And I would like to request that we be noticed officially as to when your meetings are held or when your estimates come out.
I would be
Because
happy to
now
do that.
I'm sitting here thinking about the money that has been spent estimating the number of children in my parish. And back to being fiscally responsible. If that's what you do, why are we paying consultants to give us the same information? And I'm also going to want to look at the numbers that we have received from those consultants to see if they match the numbers that you have. Because if yours are the official numbers, what are we doing? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Johnson.
I have a question. Thank you all for the report. I'm glad that you were able to come and bring it to. And what I'm looking at, I'm in the total demand of Louisiana's public school regular and special ed classroom teachers, and I'm on page 4, and there's a table in it, and it seems there are two things that I've noticed about the data so far. One is that there's a trend downward of the number of students from years ago to where it is now. But also that in 2011, you're projecting that we will need a total of 49,000 teachers. That's the projection. Then you're projecting some growth over time to 2016. But over on the next page, the table 4, State of Louisiana, you're showing the demand of teachers and the new demand, which is only 1,500 teachers over that period of time. That's a total new demand over a 6-year, 5-year period of time.
But that's just based on growth. There are also demand based on other factors.
I know. I'm asking him to tell me what he's doing here, because we just talked, and if y'all remember, in a committee about spending close over $2 million to recruit new teachers, 550 for this year.
Well, remember that what we're really talking about here is, as I had said previously, is we're talking about demand associated with the growth in the student population.
Right.
But you and I both know that every year teachers retire.
You have a replacement demand.
That's exactly right. So the total here reflects the demand associated with new growth plus replacement.
Right. Okay.
Right.
That's important. I really got that. I knew that's what it meant. I'm just looking at what we're doing in terms of our recruiting effort.
Well,
Ms. Dastu, if it's okay with you, I'd like to take this information home and, like you say, really eat it.
Yep.
And I
That's
don't
the
want
idea.
anybody up here to try to tell me what's in it. Please don't do that.
And thank you, Ms. Johnson. Okay, I think the request is that the board members provide some feedback to the executive director on how this information could be helpful and could be more helpful in the future, and to provide that feedback to the conference committee prior to their next meeting in October. So that will be coordinated. You'll get some outreach from our office.
Contact information, please.
I'm sorry?
I'd like contact. I don't know where they are.
Okay. It's going to come through Catherine. But
all of the information, including soft copies of the handouts that you've received today, and contact information will be coming out next week in the BESE newsletter, and I will also share with you all how we will collect your feedback as well.
Okay.
It
is a Ms. Givens.
Of the department, I'd like to have a copy of the contracts that we issued to have these projections done, because I want to know how much money we spent on projections.
The contract for the Education Estimating Conference is offered through the governor's office, and it's actually not our, okay.
Not yours.
Okay.
I want ours.
Since that is not part of this item, I suggest you put the request through. There we go. Thank you. I'm just trying to I want to make sure that gets captured, Ms. Givens. I'd like to thank you, Ms. Palmieri, for coming, and it is such a pleasure to meet the famous Dr. Brady that I read about and hear about, and we are delighted that you came today, and we are appreciative of your time and your presentation.
I'd also like to add something. I have, some of the times I've gone, Dr. Brady, it's been a very hotly contested meeting, and you know, it sometimes rivals some of the things that we do up here. But I want to tell you that I need your autograph.
Madam Chairman?
Mr. Garvey.
I'd like to offer a motion to receive the report.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Ms. Johnson, thank you. Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. The chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move that we adjourn.
No? The meeting is adjourned.
That concludes all the items on our agenda. Yes.
I don't know why. Ma'am, I didn't say a word, but you know I appreciate it.
Robin Jenkins.